For the last 5 months, I've been visiting all the schools in our school board, the elementary schools, to model ways of integrating curriculum within the classroom, within an arts context, and to model some of the strategies you can use in bringing the new visual arts curriculum alive in our schools.
We're going to have a fabulous morning. We're going to spend most of the time painting, but as usual, we're going to talk a little bit about artwork first, and then I'll do a bit of a step-by-step instruction plan, and you'll spend the rest of the morning painting. And I know how good you are at making artist statements. You'll also be making an artist statement about your artwork. I know that you've looked at this book, The 7 Sacred Teachings. What can you tell me that you remember about this text?
It had values and virtues on all of the artist statements.
Ellie, do you remember what some of those values and virtues were?
There's honesty and then love.
The intent for this lesson was, first of all, to connect it to the grade 6 curriculum in social studies, as well as in the visual arts. And in social studies, of course, the focus for grade 6 is on First Nations peoples of Canada. So our focus is more on bringing a cultural awareness, and I feel one of the best vehicles for that, of course, is through the visual arts.
So what we're going to do today is we're looking at the specific artwork to show how an artwork can show the meaning of a value or a virtue. And we're going to use those techniques when we do our paintings. As you remember, this is the cover, and that's White Buffalo Calf Woman, remember? And you can see in her, you can see all the connections to living things. You can see the turtle in there, which is a symbol of creation, the sun, the circle, which is a symbol of eternity. You can see all of the animals that are inside her that show the interconnectedness of that woman with so many living beings and energies on the planet.
I've chosen these texts to create an awareness in partnership with our First Nations local elders so that we can present a worldview that is in history substantially different from the Eurocentric worldview that is so often shown in our current social studies texts.
What we learned from Mary Wallace was about our Aboriginal and First Nations woodland art. We learned about some different virtues and values for different paintings, and they all have different colors and purposes.
Why did the artist Christy Cameron use a turtle in the first illustration in the book? Joseph?
Because that was the beginning, that was their creation story, and they're using it at the beginning because that was the beginning of the world for them.
Very good, thank you. What is the virtue for this painting? Natalie?
Humility.
Why does this picture show humility?
Because it looks like he's a lone wolf roaming, but there's parts of him inside that are connected.
Yes, and the wolf stays connected, as you said, with those lines inside to the rest of the wolf pack. And the wolf is humble because he shows his ability to do teamwork and to not care just about himself by those connections. So Christy has shown that, as you said, by using the lines connecting the wolf to all the pack members inside.
Throughout the lesson, I wanted the students to have an awareness of the elements and principles of design. We also spoke about the color wheel and different color schemes they could use.
There are specific colors that mean certain different types of moods and energy, and like analogous colors and tertiary colors and complementary colors.
And if students needed prompts or reminders about how color theory worked, there were anchor charts on the walls that they could refer to so that the students themselves could problem solve.
And if we look at all of the elements in this painting, how are they all connected?
Line.
Line, and what kind of line do you see here?
Ones that are curved and they go throughout the whole thing and connect everything.
Very good. And in this painting, they're not all black, but they're all different colors, aren't they? They're all the complementary color here of orange is blue, you can see. So the lines surround everything to show the interconnectedness. What do you think this little spot in here is? So inside this raven, we're seeing different shapes and colors, and they are symbolic of different things. So what do you think that this orange shape surrounded by a blue line is a symbol of? Gabby?
Heart.
I think it might be a symbol of a heart because you can see the blue energy lines coming from it that could show the
It's
blood.
just amazing how they have half. It's like half the picture is like animals and the other half is filled with symbols. Like everything means something. Even the sky of it, the background, everything means something. There's not one thing that they just added randomly.
You're each going to create a painting in this woodland style. So you might think about what animal represents a feeling or an idea or a virtue that you have. You might want to think about how you
were able to create and think about preliminary work. Most of that was done through discussion and through a very brief Blackboard example. And the reason for it being brief is that I did not have a preliminary lesson with the students where they could create a lot of thumbnails and so on. Although you did see some students doing sketches, moving their shapes around to see which way they worked best. So once they had the design down, then they would plan further and with pencil in their ideas, thoughts about how they could express what it is they wanted to express. And from there, they could revise and once they had solidified their plan, move on, choose their color scheme, perhaps experiment with a bit, and then go back and get their paint and start painting their final creative product.
And what are you going to put in each of those quarters?
One baby here, one cub, like just 4 different cubs.
Sounds like a good plan.
If you can see here, there's a line from the eye, and it's going out the mouth through, and I'm gonna probably draw like a sun here, and then the direction lines so he's like aware and probably connected to the wolf.
I'd love to share some of the experience I've had of making painting a very doable project, no matter what the location is or no matter who the students are. And some of those tips I have are, number one, to use recyclable paper palettes to paint on. And another thing that I found invaluable is to pre-drill little holes in the top of tempera jars. To close them, I merely put a little piece of masking tape on top. But with those little holes, as you can see, the students only put out a few drops of paint, as much as they need. Also, I have 2 buckets of water. One is a bucket for clean water, and the other bucket is empty, and it's for dirty water. So the students can carefully pour out their dirty water and immediately get some more clean water. And when the paint is contained in these little squeeze containers, and water is dispensed in small bowls. And you remind the students to keep the water into the middle of their group desks so that there's no spillage from elbows and so on. You could see it was a very doable, neat, tidy process, minimal cleanup, still very satisfying with lots of open-ended choices for students in terms of what paints to choose, what color to choose, very self-directed, but very contained and doable in terms of any mess you might perceive when you're thinking of a painting project. All the time they were discussing, interpreting, analyzing why they chose certain colors, either in terms of color theory or in terms of what they were trying to say about the energy of a particular animal or environment.
I actually picked all the complementary colors, green, red, blue, orange, yellow, purple, and white, so that when I paint it, all the parts of my picture stand out because of the complementary color beside them.
I use mainly complementary colors to make it pop out. And then I have yellow around his heart there, just so adrenaline pumping. And these shapes in between the blue is as if I'm going to color it green. So it's going to be like all the places the wolf has roamed.
I used these little swirls on my swan because it represents loyalty, and I was planning on coloring the swan maybe like a royal red or like a royal purple.
I want my piece to convey that it's the circle of life and we all have meanings and purposes. And the fish gave its life for the owl so it could live, so it's the circle of life.
I put a wolf on the rock because it represents the wolf on land, and the fish in the water, and the beaver on his house, the logs.
The mood I wanted was for brightness and sort of energetic and joy and like pop out colors.
I use mainly complementary colors because I thought it stands out more. Like I used blue as the sky and orange on the rams.
So if you made the wolf the complement of the blue here and the blue lines there, all of a sudden what you're going to see instead of the busy lines, because you have a real contrast in your complementary colors, that's going to be brighter than the lines you see here now.
It was a continuous problem-solving process where they would go almost in a circular fashion, to plan, to brainstorm, then to go back to design, rethink the problem. If something wasn't working, what could they use in terms of color theory or line to solve that problem, and then go back through that process over and over again as they created their final product.
At the beginning, I thought, okay, I'm going to do blue, green, purple. Everything's going to be cool. It's going to be a really mellow, cool piece. And it's supposed to be just relaxing. But I got a few suggestions and everything, and people helped me out, and I think it looks a lot better with and I couldn't find a brown so I made the ground actually red. And it actually looks a lot better now.
If the student work is going to be assessed, then I would look at the particular points that I had used in the teaching of the lesson that I've used prior and that they've had prior ability to experiment with and consolidate their learning. So in other words, they've had quite a bit of teaching and practice in mixing colors, in using different types of color schemes, in putting complementary colors beside each other. We're just beginning to look at tertiary colors. They're certainly familiar with using a triadic harmony or complementary harmony. They know what the secondary colors do. They would be very appropriate to put into an assessment rubric so that it would be an assessment of learning.
So when we first look at this painting, what is your first impression of this painting?
Well, it looks like all the animals are alive in the picture.
So you're saying you can really see the energy? It's because she used those complementary colors together so effectively. And the painting works as a whole because she had a triadic color scheme. Let's ask the class, since everybody's looking at your painting like you would look at a painting in a gallery, how effectively did Ellie use the elements to give a message?
Like the turtle was kind of like the creator of all the other animals. And it's nice how like the wolf is standing on top of the turtle, as in one of the 7 teachings, how all the tiles on the turtle's back was an animal. And that kind of shows that on our painting.
The students were very engaged in their drawing and their painting and their interpreting and so on. What the teacher will do with this particular lesson next is go back and make more connections to the social studies curriculum, but also in terms of literacy, the teacher is going to use questions specifically from the document, from the critical analysis process, and use the prompts from the document. It's a wonderful way for the students to be able to express what the meaning of the artwork is, whether it's talking about the artist's life and the context from that life, or from connections they're making to their own life, to their classroom, to the texts they're studying in social studies or in literacy. It helps them understand how the world is viewed differently by different people, how that can be expressed in an artwork, but also how they themselves can express themselves in their own artwork.
It's like a way to express your feelings sometimes, in a way like that you feel free. If like you're, let's say, mad, you can just go like really fast. If you're like calm, you can just go slowly.
I actually drew a wolf with a dragonfly because I thought of how a wolf would, like what a wolf would want to do if it could do anything, and I thought maybe it would want to fly.
That's where the joy comes from. The joy comes from seeing the joy and the beauty in those faces when they light up as they're creating their art, as they're talking about it, and when they're showing their artworks. To me, that's the essence of the arts, is the joy of creation, and then being able to share and communicate about that creation.